and welcome to Badass Moms, brought to you by the Holistic Therapies Directory. I'm Nicole Cruz, super busy mommy coach. I'm really excited about today's guest, Tawny Platis, founder of Death is Hilarious. Before we jump into that, I just want to tell you about a new program that I have that I'm really excited about. A lot of you know that I do holistic resilience mentorships, which has a comprehensive approach: fitness, nutrition, mindfulness, sleep, stress management, you name it. And I found that one-on-one guidance for people in the trickiest situations is really important, but that's often when you have the least amount of money to afford it. So I'm offering a new hybrid program, which is one-on-one light guidance combined with do-it-yourself resources. So if you're interested in that, you can message me at Super Busy Mommy Coach on Facebook or Instagram, and I will get right back to you. So anyway, back to the reason you're here. I am so excited to introduce Tawny Platis. Tawny is a voice actor, content creator, and comedian from San Diego, California. She's also the founder of the nonprofit Death is Hilarious Grief Relief Foundation, which is an organization that provides one-on-one mentorships, peer-led support groups, professional-led groups and talks, resource connections, and podcast production services with the humorous, realistic, and death-positive approach, all at no cost. Now, what I really fell in love with is I fell in love with this because, as a lot of you know from my backstory, those of you who've been following for a while, I lost my brother, my only sibling, in 2016. And one of his defining personality traits was that he was constantly doing just like ridiculous, bizarre stuff just because, quote, it's funny. Like, why'd you do that? Because it's funny. All the time, he was just looking to make people laugh and make himself laugh through these just like, he had that kind of sense of humor where he would just run down the street in a pink Speedo. Why? Because it's funny. So when I found this, I was like, yes, this is exactly how Eric would want me coping with his death. And so I became a supporter. You can become a monthly supporter on Patreon, correct? Yeah, so I became
correct. Patreon.com.
Yeah, and I encourage anyone who finds that this resonates with you to do the same. So anyway, so excited to have you on here, Tawny. That's enough from me. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I love and appreciate that glowing introduction. Thank you so much.
You deserve it. Yeah, so first I'd love for you to it's like one of those things you feel awkward being like, hey, can you just publicly share all of your like darkest moments? But this is what you do all the time. So I feel very comfortable asking you, Tawny, can you share all of your darkest moments that brought you to the point of founding an organization called Death is Hilarious?
No, I'm a very private person. Yeah. So my husband and I, his name was George, we had a comedy show together. I'm a voice actor and we started podcasting together. We were both total comedy nerds, loved comedy, grew up doing comedy. We're both theater kids. So we started something called the Dirty Bits podcast in 2017, and it got pleasantly popular for us. And it was something that used history in order to convey comedic jokes about just the realistness and absurdity of life. So we have always been creating productions together, creating these comedy shows together, doing that kind of stuff. And he also had something called hypoplastic left heart syndrome. That's a congenital heart defect. And he was born with 3 chambers in his heart instead of 4. He had 1 ventricle instead of 2, and his heart was a mirror image on his chest. And most people that are born with that, they only live until nowadays in their 30s. The surgery that was invented only came out like 2 years before he was born. So it's still very new, surviving past like palliative care with this. So he knew from a very young age that it was like a toss up. He was very confronted with his own mortality right away. He used dark humor to cope with that. He always joked about it. And that was something that we did together, like knowing I was going to be a young widow. When he died unexpectedly, like he was doing okay, and we were actually really hopeful that we'd have until like our 40s together. It was very shocking to me. I came out of my office. I was doing voiceover in the other room, came out and saw him dead on the kitchen floor. I didn't know he was dead, so I called 911. I tried to resuscitate him. I did do a bang up job, I will say, because I broke his rib. I found that out later, and they were like, you did really well. He was already gone, but like you did the right thing. And I was like, well, that's a relief. So tried to resuscitate him until the paramedics got there. They told me he was dead, and I broke down completely. If you've ever seen that show, Jane the Virgin, when a character finds out that her husband is dead and she like drops to the ground screaming, it's very accurate. I didn't want to be alive at that point. My husband was my best friend. I was alone in the world. He's my only family. I was like, there's nobody who loves me. I'm totally alone. And I was planning on taking my life. Like I was like, the paramedics will clear out of here at some point, and I'm going to take my life while I'm holding his body. And I started to explain that to the paramedics and realized, like telling them I need to keep body so I can go through with my suicide plan here. And I realized as I was saying that they were going to take me to psych. If you're a suicide risk, they put you away for a couple of days with some grippy socks. And I'm like, well, that'll really throw a wrench in my plans, if they do that. So I stopped myself mid-sentence, and I was like, wait, I just need you guys to leave the body with me. But I guess you can't. Otherwise, we're liable to end up with like a Norman Bates type situation here from Psycho, and that's not good. I made a joke, and the paramedics started cracking up. So in that moment, as a performer, as an entertainer, I was like, oh, like the audience is laughing. Wait, what? It felt really, really good in the middle of this devastation. So I kept going. I was like, or maybe you could leave the body with me, and I could just sling him over my shoulder like Weekend at Bernie's, and we can just see how long it takes people to notice that he's dead. Like, that's not creepy at all. That's super cute and quirky, right? And they kept laughing. So I just kept going for as long as they were there. And one of the things that they said to me, because they took me outside eventually, and they were, talking with me and trying to calm me down, very kind. A trauma specialist was brought on the scene. We have a volunteer organization here in San Diego where folks will come out who are trained to handle people in intense traumatic situations who are going through crisis. And they all, not all, but like several of them were like, you're going to be all right, because I was joking about it. These are people that see horrific things day in and day out. They absolutely make dark jokes to handle it. And that was something that really stuck with me moving forward from that day, was them going like, you're going to be all right. And that's how everything started. I started incorporating my grief into my comedy as an entertainer. I turned my husband and my podcast into Death is Hilarious, where I interview other people who are doing similar things, who are taking kind of a different approach to grief. They're incorporating humor into their work in some way, content creators, writers, artists, other comedians. Stand-up grieving is what I kind of call it. You're on stage and you're making jokes about these traumatic, terrible things, this grief. And that turned into the organization. I wanted to bring these people together who were like me, because outside of those professions, like, paramedics, nurses, the therapists, combat vets, it's those professions, it's kind of like normal. People joke with each other, with their coworkers about the trauma and about the horrible things that they're seeing that are a part of their job. There isn't any organization like that when you experience that, just kind of like as a civilian, as I like to say. Like, I didn't have like a bunch of widow friends at the time where I'm like, hey, I just wanted to call you and make some jokes about my dead husband. You guys get it. That wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
So I started sharing about what I was doing and experiencing and thinking online. I started making TikToks and reels about it, created a Discord, an online group for other people in their 20s and 30s who are grieving, who understood. I missed my husband, but it was absurd. And that's where the comedy was coming from, and wanting to find that relief from the pain by making jokes about it.
That's beautiful. I mean, and it's so powerful. And it just goes, like when we were chatting before this, you mentioned there's no right way to grieve. And it just speaks to that so much, because what you do is so healing.
Thank you. I do like to say that there is no right or wrong way to grieve. We kind of make a joke about it in the Discord. We say like the only wrong way to grieve is if you waterboard your kids or your animals. So don't do that. Your in-laws are fine, but not your animals or your kids.
Oh God. Yeah. Yeah,
You don't want to do that. We don't encourage that.
talk about dark humor. One thing that really like that I really noticed that made me relate to to something you said, was when you use the word dead, because I feel like people tiptoe around that so much. And like you said, there's no wrong way to grieve. And so I respect everyone else's approach to this. But I personally hate like passed away or in a better place. I'm just like, I feel like that's not capturing the gravity of the situation. Like, my brother is effing dead. That's the reality of it. And I almost feel like I'm like glossing over it or not honoring what he went through if I don't say that. And I'm wondering if you have a similar reason for using such blunt words, and how people tend to react to it with you.
I'm so glad you brought that up, actually. I host a podcast, Death is Hilarious, and one of the things that I do every Tuesday is speak with one of our support group facilitators, who is a grief therapist and a widow. And she was just talking about that on our show that we recorded today, how she can't stand that and how counterproductive it is to say passed away, lost, to tiptoe around it. She's like, say death and dead. That's what it is, and very similar reasons to what you were saying. And it makes it so that we don't talk about it like we're treating it like it's this like dirty, yucky thing. We do that with things that like make us uncomfortable because they're not pleasant to talk about, and you're trying to soften it. And I think when you do that, you kind of, whatever your intentions are, I think it still happens. You make it so it's difficult to talk about, or that there's some kind of shame associated with it. It's natural. Death happens. I feel like we need a book for it. Like, we have everybody poops. Like, people don't want to talk about pooping. We need everybody dies. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's normal. It's natural. Like, we will all die. And that's very, very scary to people. And that's why they try to pad it. And death, dead, it comes off as abrasive to people. But I will tell you, a licensed therapist who specializes in grief, who is a widow, is right there with you. So I don't think you're wrong.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I feel like usually if I'm talking to most other people, I'll say I lost him, because I'm like, that is very accurate. But like, if I were to be like, yeah, so my brother's dead, like, my dead brother, it's just sort of like, I feel like it makes other people really uncomfortable. It's like, and it's like, for me, that's what it feels like. It feels that harsh.
It is that harsh. It's not especially when it's a tragic death, because we do have death, which is sad, but there is something different about tragic death. If you are 98 years old and you are surrounded by your family, peacefully riding a unicorn into the sunset in that bed, nice and warm and cozy, that's not tragic. It's sad. You will miss your grandparent. It's very sad, of course. But it is tragic when you have brutal young deaths. And people are reminded of that. And I think that's what makes them uncomfortable, knowing that could happen to me, that could happen to somebody I love. It's very scary. And a lot of people, because most people don't like to be scared, most people don't like to be uncomfortable. We don't live in a culture that really embraces that. We are very taught to like only be happy all the time. Toxic positivity is very much a thing in our culture.
You
And
think?
it really, yeah, you got to be a good little happy worker bee. And it really limits the human experience when you do that too. It really does. We are complex humans, and joy and happiness and sadness and anger, that is all part of the human experience, and it's natural.
100%, 100%. And I feel like, especially with the topic like death, there's almost this like hands over the ears, like, la, la, I'm not listening, you're not there, with your eyes closed like a little kid. And that's probably not the healthiest approach to dealing with something that's absolutely inevitable for everyone around you and yourself.
And I get it. People aren't used to talking about it, and I'm grateful for the resources and the mediums we have now where people are normalizing that more. We are talking about it more. The more you talk about it, the less scary it's going to be. Like it's my job, like I'm the CEO of this foundation. It's in my comedy. I'm talking about it all day, every day. Like I am unfazed now. I have to actually like remember when people start talking about that stuff and they're emotional. I'm like, yes, the fact. I'm like, oh yes, we're upset about this. That's terrible, and not because I don't have empathy, but because I have very much taken the radical acceptance approach to it. And I'm not saying I've done that with everything in my life. I've just like I've dealt with my husband's death very head on. I've been in therapy for it. I love radical acceptance because you're just like in it. It is what it is. I can't change it. How am I going to deal with it? So, I think that is such a big part of being able to be comfortable with it, is immersing yourself in it. And I just immersed myself in all things like grief right after he died. I dealt with it.
I feel like someone who's gone through what you have, and then like you said, like empathizing with people who are, say, going through something for the first time, or hasn't gone through something quite as traumatic as what you went through, probably has like, I think like, when like a teenager tells, like what you just told me just almost sounded like when a teenager tells their parents, like, my boyfriend broke up with me, and they're like, yeah, that sucks. Just like sort of that, like, oh yeah, this is serious. Okay, let me get myself back in that mindset of how serious this is.
Which I do, and I do understand the spectrum too. Like I am at a point where it's like somebody will say like, oh my God, I stubbed my toe and it's the worst thing ever. I'm like, it is the worst thing ever for you today. That's fine. Because I'm thinking, we think like, I can think of some worse things than
Yes.
stubbing your toe, Hallie.
Yeah. Does anyone ever like say something like that and then look at you and have that expression on their face like, crap, I said that to the wrong person?
Not anymore.
Okay, I really
no, everybody's always like worried. They're like, I don't want to be in your show. I don't want you to use me as a bit.
Oh God. Okay, I have to dive into radical acceptance with you, because first of all, that's just like, I mean, it's research driven, it's based in a bunch of like traditions that are like hundreds, millennia old, whatever. And I also personally have experienced how powerful it is, but I also know that there's a big difference between intending to radically accept and thinking in your mind, okay, this happened. This is it. It totally happened and I have to accept it, versus feeling the radical acceptance. And I'm so grateful that I was exposed to that concept well before I had to deal with the death of my brother, because I feel like being able to practice it in smaller situations was sort of like, like running your 3K and your 10K before your marathon, it was like it was absolutely necessary. And then in that moment, I was just in shock at how much, like, how hurt I was, how incredibly painful. Like, people ask, like, what's the worst pain you've ever experienced? And I'm like, not childbirth, grief. you know
Right.
And it's like,
Yeah.
my childbirth was epic, like pushing for 4 hours before then getting in a car to go to the hospital, like, but no, I will do that every day for the rest of my life if I never have to experience grief ever again. Like,
Yeah.
hands down. But like that experience, when I actually like, I was shocked I was able to actually feel it. And then I was like, oh my God, I don't know what I would do going through this if I wasn't already exposed to that and practiced enough to use it in this situation. So I'm wondering, for you, like, did you experience that, like, sort of conflict between intending but not really feeling it, or were you exposed to this like well before this happened, so you were like ready to use it?
I really relate to what you were saying about having had the previous exposure, so being able to use it. And I remember thinking that hours after my husband died, because I called my therapist. I'm like, it happened, like we were anticipating it, not anytime soon, but I knew I was going to be a young widow. And I was like, thank God, because like I am having suicidal ideation. This is like wrecking me. And I was prepared. I have skills. I've been studying for this. I am the best student ever. Like, I should be getting an A in grief. Like, I have been preparing for this test. Like, and it's still so hard. So I was really grateful. It was really tough, and it wasn't something consistent. Like, there's this myth about stages of grief, and it's like, oh, you're in this stage and then you'll progress to the stage and then you'll progress to this next stage. And once you're past that, you're past that.
And
And
then
it's
it's
not how,
over and you're great and live happily ever after.
right. I hate to break it to you, but that's not how it works. It's not linear. It's very weebly wobbly all over the place. I would be in those times of radical acceptance, maybe not in the next 5 minutes or the next day or the next week. It was very back and forth. And you learn to cope too. You learn to radically accept and you learn to cope with practice and time. And I think that's something that we forget a lot, when we're in pain, is like, you're in pain and you're suffering and you're thinking, this is going to last forever. It's always going to hurt this bad. It's going to last forever. And it doesn't. It takes a lot of hard work and it's painful. It's excruciating and it's brutal. It takes time, but it doesn't always hurt that bad. And that was something that was something I had to practice getting good at. I had to keep remembering, and I'm still not great. I still have bad days where it's like, I like forget. I feel like I don't have object permanence. I'm like, oh yeah, I've learned about this. That's right. I know this coping mechanism. I know that skill. you know, it's part of the trauma as well. It's like the memory being not great anymore. And that's why we keep going to therapy. It's very much like, I think, going to the gym in a way,
I was
where it's like,
thinking that.
oh my God, of course you were. We're twinsies.
And half of what I do is fitness, so everything has a fitness or health analogy. But it was like,
Yeah, but it's true. Like,
yeah.
if I want to have an amazing ass, I need to be very consistent with my squats. If I stop doing the squats, my ass will stop looking great. And it's the same thing with your mental health and your coping skills and your grief healing. You have to be consistent about it. And we all have times where we fall off, you get sick for a week, so you can't work out or you get busy, stuff happens, so you miss a week, but you hop back on and you keep going and you hope that your gains don't suffer too much.
Yeah, I was totally thinking of like a slightly different analogy, but I like the nice butt one. It's kind of glamorous. I was thinking like you have this, burden to carry around with you. But it's like lifting weights. If you start with the 5-pound dumbbells, they feel hard at first, but after a while, it feels easy. You could throw them up in the air. So you have this heavy burden, but because you're practicing so much, you get stronger and it doesn't feel so heavy anymore.
Yeah.
But your butt gets nice.
That's See, you had like the really nice, like wholesome analogy. I just wanted to talk about my ass.
Hey, everyone grieves differently. There's no right and wrong. Yeah, so what has the path been like for you, and how has it been coaching other people through their experiences?
I don't know if I'd say I coach other people through their experiences. I try to support because I am very self-aware and I know that I am not a mental health professional. I am a comedian that makes dick jokes about her dead husband on TikTok and I am 31 years old. I understand and am mortified at myself. Don't worry, everyone. And it's been cool being supportive, being able to be a mentor, maybe, as somebody who is, a grizzled old widowed veteran at 2.5 years out from death.
Mm.
It's been really cool to be able to be there for like the fresher ones, as I call them, the ones that are a couple months out in their first year and they're saying these things and I'm like, oh yeah, I was there, and being able to be there and not be shocked, because that's so often what I think grieving people are looking for is they're looking to talk about their feelings, what they're going through, what they're experiencing, and other people get uncomfortable. They don't know what to say, so they run away. And then those grieving people feel isolated.
Mm.
And you're already grieving somebody who's not here anymore. You don't need to feel any more isolated than you already are, any more lonely. So being able to be there and listen to them and be like, yeah, yeah, it sucks. Oh yeah. I felt that. I said that same exact thing. Or my husband also died in the kitchen like a jackass. I can't, every time I make soup now, I'm traumatized because I just have flashbacks. It's been really encouraging, I think, to know that I can give some kind of purpose to it, like as a human, because I personally think the universe is chaos. But as a human, I want meaning. I want to assign meaning. So being able to take that and use it and be able to have it mean something to someone else so that it's helpful has been fulfilling. So I'm glad that I'm able to take something totally horrific and help others with it. And I don't think that that is for everybody. Like if you're grieving, like focused on you, I don't think you have to like turn it into something good and look for the silver linings and use it to help others. I don't think that that's everybody's calling, but it's been really, really, it's given me a lot of purpose.
Oh man. That I thought was beautiful. But you also just touched on other things where I'm like, we have to dive more into that. We have to dive more into that. One of them is the silver lining thing, like you ever have people trying to find a silver lining in something like that, and you're just like, it's really is it as uncomfortable for you as it is for me?
Like the silver lining in finding my husband dead on the kitchen floor when he was 29. No, there's no silver linings there, Margaret. No,
He's in
not
a
at all.
place.
No, he most certainly is not. That's a
Oh,
lie.
he's no longer
Especially,
suffering. All of those. It's just like I appreciate the intention, but I didn't find any of that helpful.
no, because it hurt. What you're hearing when you are, especially when you're in those early days of grief, is that I'm uncomfortable by this. Like, I need you to be like more okay. Like you need to be positive. It's part of that toxic positivity thing. What you're saying is like, it's wrong for you to be feeling like this. You need to be looking at the good things. You should be grateful. You feel wrong for grieving, for being upset. Of course you should be upset. There is no positive spin to put on this. You just want to feel bad until you don't want to feel that bad anymore. It's part of it. And that timeline looks different for everybody. Those expressions of grief look different for everybody. And it's not bad to feel bad about something horrible that happened. You don't want a Band-Aid for it.
Yeah. And I think there's this idea too, like when I think about, say like a lot of people close to me, the idea is that this person is sad. If I want to be a good friend, family member, it's my job to say something to make them feel better. We're supposed to try to cheer people up. And in those moments, it's just, I feel like the best thing is the dark humor, to acknowledge how bad it is. Like that was actually the kind of thing that cheered me up. Being able to laugh and be totally real.
Completely. And everybody is different, of course. Not everybody is into the dark humor thing, and that's okay.
Totally.
And that's just what matters, is that like, when somebody's like, I don't like making jokes about it, that's not my thing. I'm like, that's okay. That doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you either. Just to be extremely clear, it's very much about meeting that grieving person where they are. So if the grieving person is like, I'm just really finding a lot of comfort in my walk with Christ, and I know that my spouse is in a better place, and it's just giving me a lot of peace. I'm like, absolutely, like as an atheist, absolutely. He is with Christ. He is playing Frisbee with God. Like everything is fantastic for him right now. You'll be reunited someday. That is so hopeful. Like that's what matters, is that you are finding, or the grieving person is finding that comfort and that relief. And it's our job as the supportive friends to, reiterate those things. That's one of the things that I always really appreciated. I had a couple of friends that they met me where I was. My best friend from like we all grew up together, this little friend group, and we all got married to each other. My best friend and I, who is really close, George and her were really close too. They just thought the world of each other. She came over after George died, and she's like, can I curse on your show?
That's fine.
She goes, this is fucking bullshit. And I was like, this is fucking bullshit. Like, yeah, it really is. That was some of the best stuff, is that people are just like, this sucks. This is awful. Because that's what it was. Yeah, absolutely. I hated people telling me I needed to be strong, telling me I needed to be strong for his parents because they were the ones who were really grieving, because this was their only child and I was so young and was going to get married again soon, so I don't have it nearly as hard as they do.
Actually said that like
stuff
to your face
at his wake.
Wow. Like
it's funny now. I was not laughing at the time.
Wow. Like amazing that could really, like, Netflix couldn't have written that better.
Oh, man, old people are something else, I gotta tell you.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I think that is like probably the best way that you can help somebody, is just meeting them where they are, like repeating what they're saying. Like if they're like, I hate this, be like, yeah, of course, this is the worst, like this is the worst thing ever. Yeah, this is the worst thing ever. Of course you hate this. Totally makes sense. And then offering things, like practical things, because you're so out of your mind, understandably. So I always joke, people are like, well, if I don't offer thoughts and prayers, what can I offer? And I go, pizza and beer. Like that was like the best thing for me. I don't want your thoughts and prayers. I don't want your love and light. I would love booze and snacks though, like, and your Netflix password, actually. Like those would be very helpful right now.
I feel like, and it it mostly didn't fall on me, but I feel like after going through the experience with my brother, there should be like a new tradition in our society where everyone else chips in to plan the funeral. Cause like, okay, like, have you ever planned a wedding or like any big thing? It's a ton of freaking work. It's a ton of work, a million decisions to be made. It's so stressful. Now try doing it when the worst thing ever has happened. It's just like, that's what hit me. I'm like, wait, we're supposed to what now? Like now?
Yeah.
Like can we do that next month? No, we have to do this now. Like, are you kidding me? It was just like, I mean, it happens, but like living it is just sort of like, what the hell is going on? Like, it was just not something that had sunk in before, you know?
That's very American. Yeah, it's very American. Like different cultures are very different where it's like the community comes in. My husband was Greek Orthodox, and he's from a very like prominent Greek Orthodox family in our city. They had like literally, this is not an exaggeration, they had literally hundreds of people coming together just taking care of everything. The Greeks took over. And it's like that in different cultures.
That makes so much more sense.
Mhm. Yeah. You've
Yeah.
ever seen My Big Fat Greek Wedding? I had My Big Fat Greek Funeral. Like they just like they come in whirlwind and everybody's doing everything and you're just
Yeah, I like that better. Yeah, like, don't get me wrong, family chips in, but that's like now if I know anyone who goes through something like that, I'm like, let me know if you want someone else making the phone calls, if you want someone else picking out any of the, like, whatever you don't care about, I'm happy to take care of and take it off your plate, because I feel like that's something that, some people are like, no, I want to be in control of all of it. That's cool
yeah,
too. But I feel like that's something that would be really helpful for a lot of people.
definitely. I think that that's one of the cool things about sharing about it, in these spaces is normalizing different, having those like options too,
Mhm.
and being able to communicate to people, that you want that. I also think that is why it's so good. Even if you are young and healthy and everything is great, have a will, have a plan, have these things laid out. It's going to make it easier for the ones that you love afterwards, and it's going to make it so that the things that you want to happen do happen. It's really really good insurance.
Yeah, that's true. That's really good advice. So one more thing I definitely want to touch on, which you touched on a little bit earlier, is the timeline. And like, yes, the timeline's different for everyone, but I feel like the timeline between the grieving person and the rest of the world is where the biggest discrepancy is.
Yeah.
So it's, so I'm wondering, as someone who has dealt with this and then who deals with this with such a large population because of the work you do, like, can you talk to that a bit? Like what thoughts do you have around that, and what can people do? Like, it almost feels awkward. Like, sometimes I'll know, like, other people are, probably still grieving like a year after their dad died or whatever, but I just feel like it's taboo for me to like go to them and be like, I just wanted to check on you and see how you're doing about, your dad. It's like, I don't like what's the right way to even approach something like that? Should you like, I know there are times when I wish I had people still checking on me, you know?
Yeah, completely. That's a great question. Most people want to talk about it, and I think that it's okay to ask them that too. You know, how have things been with grief? Just like, but I mean, I'm kind of a blunt person. I like when my friends are
How's
like,
your
"How are the dead
dog? How are
husband
the
feels?
kids? How's your grief?
How's your grief?" Checking in on big days too, and I think that like that's okay to check in like that. It's so different for everybody too. It's tough to like give like a hard answer on that as far as like, checking in on people. When is it okay? When is it not okay? I think for the most part, it's like people grieve in some capacity and it's so very forever, but it's so very individualized too, because it really just depends on that situation with that person, the access that they have to support and therapy. I am definitely like one of the weird ones because I am working and I'm talking about my grief all day, every day. So it's like I'm the opposite. Like when I'm like out of work and somebody's like, like how things go. And I'm like, fine, like, can we talk about like fucking anything else now? But that's the minority. I think most people, they want to talk about their person, and they to talk about it and feel comfortable talking about it. So if you can come in and be chill about it, be cool with it, I think most people really appreciate that. And you have to be cool with their answer too. If they're like, like, can you not say it like that? Be like, oh, cool. Like, so like, you know of a good way for me? How can I support you? That's like one I think that is like, can you think of any way that I can support you? Is there something that you have been thinking about? And it's okay if you don't know too, if you don't have an answer, offers things too. Do you need somebody to talk to about whatever it is, whatever the grief thing is, Do you want to talk about your dad? Hey, wanted to check in on you. I know Father's Day can be tough for a lot of people. Do you have any plans? Do you need food? Do you need a distraction that day? Do you want to talk about your dad, for instance? And that doesn't just have to be on Father's Day either. Just checking in, like, and I think how are you is really tough for a lot of people, especially in the early days. Like, how the fuck do you think I am?
Yeah,
So,
like, how
like,
are you holding up has become my question of choice.
right? What's going on is my favorite because it leaves it very open-ended. What's going on today? Because that's like, you can tell me about going to the grocery store, like I have work, I have a doctor's appointment, or you can be like, I am having big feelings and I want to unload on somebody. It really leaves it up to them. Hey, what's going on today? That's like, that they can share as much or as little as they want.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And what about for the grieving person who feels like, okay, well, my week off of work is done. If you're lucky, it's paid. And otherwise, now you have other stuff to worry about too. But, like, all right, so now I'm expected to go back with my happy face and just like get stuff done. And everyone else is going to forget about this in like 2 days. And I'm supposed to be normal after that, like what do you have for that person?
You do your best because that's all you can do. That's literally all you can. I think it's really helpful to find support groups with people who are in your style of grief, who can get it, those like safe places where it's like, you can go talk about it there, being comfortable asking for help and support in certain situations. Sometimes people don't have supportive workplaces. Some people do. That's very much a variable. So like reaching out and asking for help, getting really comfortable with asking for what you need and getting really comfortable with being rejected and then having to find somebody else to ask. Cause they're out there and they can be hard to find. And it's so brutal while you're grieving because it's a lot of times like, God, I'm grieving. And now I have to like do all this extra work to like build my support system and find these things. But it's worth it. It's hard, but it's worth it.
Yeah, totally. Okay, well, after spending all of this time talking about your husband and only his, dying on the kitchen floor part of his life, I would really love to give you an opportunity to just say more about him, what you love about him, how you actually want us to remember him.
He was funnier than I will ever be. He was absolutely hilarious. He was on our high school improv team, and I used to go to shows and watch him before he even knew who I was. He was hysterical. He was so handsome. I always thought he looked like Zac Efron. I had the biggest crush on him from like 12 until I married the guy.
Aw.
And he played lacrosse in high school, and he was a really great surfer, and he played clarinet, and he was a total cinephile. He loved horror movies and he loved entertainment. We both just had this passion for comedy and film. And it was one of the reasons that we started working together. We were best friends and we had so much in common. And we were like, we can create something together. We were writing stand up together. We wrote our episodes together. We produced our episodes together. I'm a voice actor, and he did a lot of my audio editing and engineering, and he helped me run my business. And he was the kindest person. He was so compassionate, and he was so kind and so inquisitive too. He was so smart. He went to school and he majored in political science and philosophy. And I loved just listening to him just like talk. He could pontificate for hours about like politics and philosophy. And I was a history nerd. That was my thing. So, which he was not necessarily like super informed in that topic as much as like I was, like as a, just like a history fan. So we were able to like have these really cool conversations where we brought together these like subjects that we both had a lot of just, knowledge about. And he was just the most fun person to have a conversation with. And he had the goofiest, most contagious laugh. So many people will talk about that. Everybody loved his laugh. And I feel so lucky that I have so many videos and audio files of us from our podcast and from all the work we've done together where I can still hear his laugh, because he had the best, goofiest, most genuine laugh. It was, I can't even compare it to anybody's because it was so unique. That was George. George was always the life of the party.
Well, he sounds lovely.
He was great. You would have loved him. Oh my God. You would have thought he was hilarious. The time we've spent together, you would have had a blast with the guy.
It sounds like it, I'm sure. And I mean, to marry you, he must have, one, had good taste, two, been pretty awesome. But I'm really happy for you that you found that and experienced that, and really sorry it was tragically cut short.
I appreciate that. And I used to dwell on that a lot, where I was like, man, wish I had never met George Platis, because then I would have never known that a connection like this existed. I could have gone throughout my entire life blissfully ignorant that two people could be this passionately in love and connected like we are. And at some point, I had this epiphany where I was like, he told me once that he thought he would never get married, that he would never find a partner or anybody because of his condition. He's like, nobody's going to want to like get married to somebody and be tied to them with all these like health problems, knowing they're going to die young. And he wanted to have a domestic life and a family so badly. Like he was like, I used to dream of my wedding as a little boy and like dream of having like a wife and kids. And he's like, I wanted that so bad. And at that point, I realized, I'm like, it's not so much about what I lost, but it's what I was able to give to him. If he was going to have this short life, if he was going to have this curse of having a short life, and that was something he wanted, that is so cool that I was able to give him this crazy, rare, passionate love. We didn't have a kid, but we did adopt this really cute little dog together that he was just crazy about, that we were both crazy about. And she was like the light of our life. We totally treated her like our daughter. I got to give him those years. I got to give him that happy domestic life. And when I get sad, and when I would get sad, that's what I would remember. It's not so much about me losing that. It's about giving George that. And I think that's really cool, because he deserved to have that.
That's so powerful.
I mean, it helps me cope at night, that and drinking, but
Yeah. Whatever works. Well, it has been such a pleasure. This is by far the most emotional podcast episode I've ever done. And yeah, I really appreciate you coming on the show. And I'd love for you to tell people how they can, keep in touch with you, follow you more, support what you're doing, reach out if they need support.
You can follow my organization on Instagram at thatdeathpod. Everything that we do is on deathishilarious.com. So you can reach out and get involved in our Discord group. We have grief support groups, and I really love our Discord group because it's really one of those places that encompasses the whole range of like what it means to be a good person. So you have these areas in the chat where you can vent, you can share pictures of your dead person, you can talk about them, or you can talk about movies that you like, you can talk about gaming, you can talk about these hot guys that you're dating, you can talk about crafting. It is a complete picture of what it is to mean, or of what it is to be a grieving person, because we are grieving, you need grief support, but that's not all we are either. You know, we are complete people. That's part of who we are, but it's not all that we are. So I really encourage people to look into the Discord group if they're looking for that kind of support. And we do Zoom support groups almost every day now of the week. So you can go have a support group discussion on Zoom, and you can enjoy the podcast as well. That's Death is Hilarious. We would love to see you there. Well, not really. I never want to see anybody there, of course. I don't want people dying on you, but if you are grieving, we would be happy to help.
Yeah, and check out the reels on the Instagram page. They give me nice little laughs whenever I see them pop up.
Thank you.
Well, thanks again so much. And thanks all of you for listening to the Badass Moms podcast, brought to you by the Holistic Therapies Directory. If you are a holistic practitioner or looking for a holistic practitioner, make sure you reach out to the Holistic Therapies Directory in order to get your page set up or find the perfect practitioner in your area or online. Look forward to seeing you in the next episode.